Hi friends, I'm so excited to have you join me here today to talk about all things picture books. Picture books are that one teaching tool that I definitely cannot live without in my upper elementary classroom. And I hope that after I share some of these tips and tricks and actionable steps that you can take, you can immediately start using picture books and see the benefits in your upper elementary classroom too. Okay, so today's session is called One Book Many Ways, using picture books in the upper elementary classroom. And my name is Jeanine Schneider, and I am the author behind Think, Grow, Giggle. So I want to share a little bit about me before we get started. I've been an upper elementary classroom teacher for 18 years in the state of Connecticut. I'm also a certified reading specialist, and I have been trained at Columbia University in addition to my certifications to be able to teach reading and writing workshop. And a little bit about this session, just to make sure you're in the right spot. You are definitely in the right spot if you want to include rich literature into your classroom, but feel like there's really never enough time to read to your students. You're also in the right spot if you want to strengthen your students' reading skills while not taking away time from content areas and all the many other things that you have to teach. So let's dive right in and talk a little bit about what picture books are. The term picture books is commonly used to describe a book that is written for children where the combination is presented through a combination of words and pictures. So in a picture book, the pictures help to tell the story as much as the words do. So that's how we can differentiate it a little bit from a chapter book. It's also written with a specific structure that helps develop a sense of storytelling, plot, and language. And most importantly, picture books are written to be read aloud to children, not for children to read themselves. And when we think about that, we're talking about that first cold read. So while a child can reread a picture book that you've read to them or one that they've heard many times, that first read aloud, we want the adults to be reading and guiding the children through the story. And that's because there is a high level of storytelling, character development, plot, and language that we really want to call attention to when we're using them in our classroom. So the power really is in the illustrations. When we think about picture books, all picture books do have illustrations to tell the story, but not all picture books have words. So the picture books without words are called wordless picture books. And while I definitely believe they have a spot in the classroom, we're not really going to chat about those today. We're going to talk about full picture books that are written and designed for upper elementary students that have that combination of words and pictures. So illustrations found in the picture books, like I mentioned earlier, are just as important as the words. They provide that visual support for all levels of learners to help them better understand the story elements, characterization, word meaning, like figurative language. All of that provides that visual support. So when you're teaching a lesson, say on how characters change, you could go through the book and really focus on the illustrations that the illustrator provided, more so than the words. The illustrations in a picture book, when you stop and really take a moment to look at them before quickly turning the page, they will strengthen all of your students' inferring and observational skills, and that inferencing is what's really important at that 3rd and 4th grade level. So those illustrations are going to do the magic for you. So what genres are there of picture books? Picture books come in pretty much any genre that you can think of. Most times when you think of a picture book, you probably think of a fictional story, whether it's realistic fiction or imaginative fiction. But nonfiction picture books are really up and coming, and you can find a wide range of nonfiction picture books that are perfect to help you teach content areas, specifically in biographical format, historical events. If your social studies and science curriculum is lacking in resources available to you, you can definitely find a picture book that will help you teach that content. You can also find picture books in poetry and prose form, which are my favorite. Of course, wordless that we spoke about. And then classic tales and fables are great. Picture books that focus on classic tales and fables are a great way to get that genre that's often missing from our instruction into your classroom. So there are many, many benefits of using picture book read alouds in your upper elementary classroom. I have a lot, but I've narrowed it down to the best benefits. So the first one is that bonding and community building around a shared title. There really is something about coming together and reading with your whole class that strengthens the bond that you have with them, builds your classroom community, and it's something that is shared among all your students. It also fosters and builds a love of reading, and it supports understanding of new words and vocabulary development, which is really important in the upper elementary level, especially when we get into figurative language, literal and non-literal meanings, words with multiple meanings as well. It increases vocabulary and the use of context clues to help us understand new words. It provides visual cues to understand plot and character development. And this is especially important to stories where inferring is needed to really understand what is happening. And I'm going to share a book about that in a moment. And of course, when we read picture books, we begin to have a pile and plethora of mentor texts that we can use for storytelling and then use again for multiple lessons like reading and writing concepts. There are a few more benefits. It helps us as teachers and students as learners of content learning. So your science and social studies lessons will get a boost with the visual cues that are provided in picture books. Picture books also provide life lessons, promotes empathy, relationship understanding, and other social emotional learning topics that you want to get into your classroom, but often can't find the time for. There is definitely a picture book for that. It gives students a common experience and provides background knowledge for topics. So before you begin a content area unit, you can read a picture book to make sure that all students are coming to the table or that unit with some background knowledge on that topic. And it increases students' conversational skills and promotes rich dialogue. So when you are talking about a book during an interactive read aloud or when you revisit it, your students' conversational skills is going to increase, their confidence is going to increase, and they're going to learn how to talk about books in your classroom. And this is something that I really love to say about the benefits of picture books in the upper elementary classroom. No matter how old students get, they still love to gather in the reading corner and get lost in a good book, listening to the soothing sound of their teacher's voice reading. And that is really, really true. I've taught third, fourth, and fifth, and my fifth graders loved picture books as much as my third graders. And it really does build that sense of community without a lot of effort. Okay, so now that we know about picture books, you're probably wondering, how can I use picture books in my classroom? Well, I'm going to share a few different ways to help you use picture books effectively in your upper elementary classroom. And these are the strategies that we're going to be talking about. You can use picture books as a pre and post assessment. You can use picture books in your content areas to help you teach a concept. And at the end, I'm also going to be sharing a bonus tip on how you can use picture books in your classroom. Okay, so let's get started with picture book tip number 1, which is using one book many ways. And the way that we do that in my classroom is to celebrate previously read picture books. We have a big basket that is labeled previously read together, and any picture book that I read aloud and that we have already digested and taken apart, I put into this basket. And my students know that 2 things will happen. 1, they can borrow from that basket. Since we've already read it together, they can now revisit that picture book. But they also know that we're going to be rereading and revisiting books from this basket many different times. And when you do that, you really get the biggest bang for your buck with one read aloud. So using one read aloud as your mentor text for several different lessons will help you save time in the classroom. So you're going to save time by rereading the books in your classroom, but there's also going to be many other benefits of revisiting a picture book more than once. So revisiting a picture book for a second, third, or fourth lesson models to your students that readers reread books. Now that's a habit that I want my students to see and learn. I want them to know that we're going to revisit books to reread again. We might revisit a book to find and clarify something we didn't understand. We can reread a book to help us find evidence or cite evidence from the text. So it gets rid of that stigma of just rereading a book because you want to either, take the easy way out. You're showing them that there's a purpose for rereading a book, and that is key. When you reread a book, you also are going to help your students practice summarizing skills. So if we read a book during reading and then we're going to revisit it the following day or a few days later during writing, well, I'm not going to reread that whole book, but I do want to summarize what happened in that book to refresh everybody's memory. So I might have one student summarize, I might have students pair up and summarize, but the more times you reread a book, the more opportunities you're providing for students to summarize and practice that skill. And rereading books and having a basket like this really does encourage struggling readers to revisit not just these books that they already understand, but to revisit their own books and reread for clarity. So I'm going to show you an example of one book that I use many different ways in my classroom. So the book is Knots on a Counting Rope. I have it right here. It's one of my favorite books. And if you don't know anything about this book, it's written by Bill Martin Jr. and it follows the story of a young boy who is listening to the story of the night that he was born from his grandfather. And the concept of the story is that every time the grandfather tells the story, he ties a knot on the counting rope. And when the rope is filled up, the boy will understand the story and know it and won't need to be told the story again. Well, what the author does not tell the reader in direct words is that the little boy is blind. And clues are given throughout the story. And one clue is that the kids often refer to is that the boy is born with a black curtain over his eyes. So the first time we read this story, we read it during reading when we're talking about asking the questions and inferring to understand. And the readers really understand at the end of the story that if they didn't stop and digest each page and ask questions and collect evidence to infer, they would have gone through the whole story without knowing that the boy was blind. So it really serves that purpose in the upper elementary classroom and drives home how to ask questions as readers and infer. Highly recommend, love this one. But that's not the only time that we use this book. Once we've read it and digested it or understand it, it goes in that previously read basket and comes out many other times. It comes out again during writing when we talk about writing with metaphors. We're not going to reread the whole book, but students will summarize it. We will find some examples that I want to call attention to. We'll revisit those pages. And since they understand the story, we talk about how metaphors help us to understand the story. We also bring this book back out during social studies when we talk about cultures and traditions. This book is rich with traditions that goes on in the little boy's family. And this book is also perfect for social emotional learning, where you can refer back to the main character and talk about self-awareness, self-confidence, and recognizing your own strengths. So with this one book, we can not only address multiple areas, but we have a teaching tool that lasts more than one period. And we can save a little bit of classroom time by revisiting instead of always constantly reading a new book. Excuse me. And this is just an example of a planning guide that I use when I find a picture book that I want to use with my students. So I just go ahead and write the title and the author in the middle. I add reading, content, writing, and social emotional learning topics. It's more of like a brain dump where I just put everything that I think this book would be good for right in this planning guide. And then I can hold on to that so I know when I'm going to use this book again. And this planning guide is in the resource with this PD, so you will have a copy of this as well. So just to recap on tip number 1, you want to look at one picture book with different eyes. You use the same picture book in multiple lessons to model good reading habits, and you and your students will begin to have that habit of revisiting one book for many reasons: reading, writing, content, and social emotional learning lessons. So if you are excited about this and want to try something out, grab the planning guide that is in that packet and go ahead and fill it out. Try to plan out how you will use one picture book many ways. It could be a back to school title. It could be one that is a staple in your curriculum. It could be one that you just bought and they're excited to use. But look at that book with more than one set of eyes so that you can figure out how it can be used again and again. Okay, so now we're going to go on to picture book tip 2. So tip 2 is to use picture books as part of your pre and post assessment, specifically in reading. That's the examples I'm going to share. So picture book read alouds can be used easily as pre and post assessments to address or target a skill or strategy concept that you need to teach anyway. So if you were going to do a pre-assessment where students were reading a passage, you take that passage out and use a picture book instead. By doing this, you will have evidence to show student growth, and you now have a picture book that can be revisited and used again for another lesson. The other great thing about this is that you are assessing a skill or strategy and not assessing students' reading. So by you reading the book, you will be able to see what skill and strategy skills they have versus them trying to read something and then applying a skill or strategy. So I'm going to show you how I do that here today. This is an example of a pre and post assessment that I use when I teach theme. So pretty much what I do is I create 3 to 4 questions related to a reading strategy, concept, or skill that I will be teaching the students. Then I select 2 picture books that are new to the students. So even though we do reread a lot of books for the actual pre and post assessment, they do have to be that first cold read. The books can be used again after for other concepts and other lessons, but for the pre and post, it has to be that cold read. So then you're going to go ahead and read aloud and have each student respond to the questions on this page. So then this page becomes the pre-assessment. You're going to go ahead with your unit, you're going to teach your unit, and when your unit is done and your lessons are complete, you're going to read aloud that second read aloud and have students respond to the same questions, but now with a new book. And I think yes, okay. So these are the 2 books that I use before and after our unit on theme. So I know that this page is a little small, so I'm going to read aloud to you the questions that I use. And I don't really help students with this because like it is the pre and post assessment. We might stop and chat once or twice about something in the book or just to clarify or answer a question, but we don't really do that deep interactive read aloud. It's more of them listening to the story and answering the question. So the first box says, what ideas or theories are you forming about the main character? The second one is, what big problems or struggles is the main character facing? The third one is, what is the big moment in the character's life? What lesson did they learn? And the last one, what big idea or theme or social issue did you discover in the book? So while these books are very different, they both have a strong character who learns a life lesson, so it makes it perfect. If you don't know either one of these, I highly recommend, especially if you're teaching theme as well. The first one is Westlandia by Paul Fleischman. It follows a boy who struggles to make friends, and after he decides to be himself and create his own land, his name is Wes, create his own land with his own interests, he learns that people do like him for who he is. And then the second one, for the post-assessment that we read, is Fly Away Home by Eve Bunting. It is also just as good as Westlandia. It follows a family, a child and the dad, who are homeless and live at the airport. So there's a lot of meat in these books, not just for theme, but to revisit. Westlandia is one that we revisit for social studies lessons when we talk about communities and mapping skills, and Fly Away Home comes up again in social emotional learning activities. So this is something you can do for any strategy, skill, or concept that you are teaching, not just theme. So just as a recap, if you do choose to use picture books as part of your pre and post assessment, you want to create 3 or 4 questions that align with the concept you will be teaching. You can use the format that I use where you have the 4 questions, or you can simply put them at the board and have students create their own boxes and take notes. You can select 2 picture books that students have not heard for the pre and post assessment, and then you can revisit those books that you read for other lessons. So if you want to try it out this summer, plan it out. Plan out your pre and post assessment questions for a specific reading strategy that you know you will be teaching, especially if you love to read picture books for back to school time. Make one of them a pre-assessment, even if it's a pre-assessment with just story elements like problem and solution. You can get a good grasp on what students know and what they don't know and what you need to teach. So if you're already planning to read picture books, go ahead and use them as some assessments. And tip number 3 is using picture books in the content areas. The same picture books that you use during your ELA lessons can be brought into your content area lessons. And that includes science, social studies, math, and any other concept that you need to teach in the content areas. Picture books that you use in the content areas can then also be revisited during your reading and writing mini lessons. So everything is interchangeable. They will be used more than once in your classroom. So I'm going to share some ways that I use picture books and some picture book examples of how I use them in the content areas. So these are going to just be easy, simple ways. As I'm sharing this, think about the concepts that you have to teach, think about the content units that you have to teach, and maybe some of the books that I share will work for your units as well. So picture books in the content area can help your students build background knowledge so they can be more successful in your content. You can also introduce and clarify a concept. I know the phases of the moon can sometimes be tricky for my students, so by using a picture book with all the visuals, it does clarify that concept. You can also use it to teach a concept. If your school does not have any resources for you, a picture book is a great way to teach a concept to students. Using picture books, you can also propose a content-based debate topic that students love, and that will not just teach a content, but it will also sharpen their reading and writing skills. And above all, picture books, especially nonfiction picture books, spark curiosity in our students and encourage them to keep reading. So here is one book that I use to build background knowledge with my students. Like I said, that moon unit is usually a struggle, especially at the beginning, until students get to know the vocabulary of the moon's phases. So we use this book, Moon, Earth's Best Friends. During the first read aloud, students take notes. We chat about those notes and we pull them together to create a class T-chart of important information that we need to know and just interesting information that students might want to share with somebody else. So breaking apart that book is really helpful. We also take the notes that they took and they start to quiz each other and ask each other questions about the moon. Another book that I use in the classroom is called We the Kids. You can use this to introduce or clarify a concept. If you teach Constitution Day like I do, this is one that you definitely want to add to your classroom library. It is just the preamble of the Constitution. However, it has photos and illustrations that we know helps to support students with important vocabulary. And it does have a glossary that breaks down the words in kid-friendly language. So students, again, can take notes. You can give them vocabulary ahead of time and ask them to look for those vocabulary words and think about what they mean. You can create a vocabulary anchor chart and then take those words and make a Kahoot game out of it. If you are looking to teach a concept, this one is perfect. It is Seaman's Journey. It's told from the perspective of the dog that went on the trail with Lewis and Clark. The illustrations, again, are perfect to understand what struggles and obstacles these explorers faced. We don't read this in one sitting. We read a little bit every day for a week. And while I'm reading it aloud, students take notes on what we've read, including the date and any problems that arose and important information. And then at the end of the week, they take all their notes and create their own scrapbook of Lewis and Clark. You can also stop every day and summarize the challenges that the characters faced. Again, practicing summarizing every day before you reread something. If you are using picture books to propose a content-based debate topic, this is one that you will definitely love if you don't have it already. It is called The Great K-Pop Tree, written by Lynn Cherry. It is perfect to help students research, compare and contrast information, and hold a classroom debate. This story is about men who enter the rainforest and are about to cut down a tree. And throughout the whole story, the animals speak about how important the rainforest is. So you can hold a debate about taking down the rainforest or saving the rainforest using not just information from this book, but research that the students then find if you're doing any kind of study on landforms, biomes, rainforests, animals. It fits in perfectly. And the last reason that I use picture books in the classroom in content areas with nonfiction text is to spark curiosity. This book is called If Sharks Disappeared. It is another great one for research to help students decide whether or not sharks are the villains that people make them out to be, and what would happen if sharks did disappear. Students can take notes as you read this. Of course, they're going to be curious about not just sharks, but other animals as well. So you can encourage students to create their own books and do their own research, perhaps something on if frogs disappeared, if bumblebees disappeared. So this is one that is perfect for sparking curiosity while also giving information and helping you teach. And then with any of these nonfiction books, you can revisit them when you are teaching, reading, and writing of informational texts. So here's the bonus tip. If you've followed me for any amount of time, you know that I am really into reading workshop, especially at the upper elementary level. And one thing that I do is carry around this workshop conference toolbox. And in that toolbox is always a previously read book, and you can see it in there as Fly Away Home. So I love to use previously read picture books to support students and help them grow as readers. So we revisit them. We revisit them not just for whole group lesson, but also during small group instruction and one-on-one conferences. So in my toolbox, I always have one previously read book that I use for any teaching unit. So for this unit, it was on characterization and understanding characters and how characters change. So as I was working with students, either one-on-one or in small group, I would pull this book back out. And again, they already know the book. We've already talked about it. We've already digested it. Now it is time for them to use it as an authentic model in their own reading. So if I'm talking about finding text evidence to support how a character is feeling, we'll go to this book, we'll revisit it, they'll have that example, and then it'll be time for them to try it out in the book. And by doing this, you can use previously read books to support all learners, all levels of learners, high and low. And every time we change units, I'm going to change that picture book. But it's easy to do because we already have collected a huge basket of previously read books. And you can see Knots on Accounting Rope peeking out there because I just love that one. And so do the kids. So fitting picture books in, how do you do that? So now hopefully you are itching to get picture books into your classroom to use for multiple reasons throughout your day. How can you get it in? So what you want to do is be consistent and stick to it. By picking a time in your day or your week, it will become a priority. And if you gloss over it or forget it, your students will remind you. So I have had tons of crazy schedules, as I'm sure you have year after year. Some years it's really easy to just get in a picture book read aloud. Other times you have to get creative. So here are some ways that you may not have thought of to get in a picture book read aloud. You can read one during morning meeting. And also, this is not every day. You do not have to feel like you have to do it every day. If you want to try to get it in during morning meeting, you could just say Tuesdays and Thursdays during morning meeting, we're going to do a read aloud. So don't commit yourself to doing something every day if you don't think you can follow through. If you do an afternoon meeting or a closing meeting, you can read a picture book during that time. If you have snack time, it's also a great time to do a picture book read aloud. If you have any of those weird, awkward minutes in your schedule, try to read a picture book. I know one year we had like a really weird 13 minutes between picking up the kids from recess and then heading to special. There was really nothing to do. It actually worked out really well that I read a picture book at that time. And immediately following recess is also a great time because it does calm the kids down and it's a really great transition into learning your next lesson. I do suggest to stay away from instructional time or mini lesson time and try to have all students present. Because remember, part of the wonders and benefits of having a picture book read aloud is that it does also build community, and it gives all your students something to refer back to in future lessons. So if you know 5 or 6 students are being pulled at a certain time, or even just one student, try to stay away from that if possible. And as well as your reading and writing mini lessons, we know those are supposed to be mini, so we can't really get in a 12-minute read aloud. So those are just some tips to help you fit it in. So picking picture books for your classroom. There are a wide range of picture books available, right? And some of the picture books, while they might look cute from the cover, you're going to pick it up and realize, well, this is a little too primary for my students. But there are definitely so many appropriate picture books for upper elementary classrooms. And some of the characteristics of picture books that are appropriate for your upper elementary classroom are stories that include detailed and complex plots. Because remember, picture books are to be read aloud to students, so it's okay if it has a complex plot. You're going to help the students break that down. You want to also have well-developed characters who change over time. You want a book that is rich in vocabulary and figurative language. We want to help grow students' vocabulary. Characters that have lessons that they are learning throughout the book. That way your students also have lessons that can be learned. You can include social issues or social emotional elements. So a book that has different layers for the upper elementary. And of course, topics that engage your cohort. So if you know one year you have students who just love hockey, you might read a biography about Wayne Gretzky, and that one becomes a book that you revisit over and over, but maybe the next year, that's not one that you revisit. So you want to have topics that engage your specific cohort of students. And here is just a quick recap overview. You can get started with picture books in your upper elementary classroom this school year. Try using one book many ways. It will help you feel like you are bringing really good quality literature into your classroom. Try using it as a pre and post assessment. If you have to assess students anyway to get a pulse on where they are, try using a book that you can reuse in future lessons. Bring picture books into your content areas. It will specifically help you if you have little resources in that content. And of course, use already read picture books to support your independent readers in a one-on-one conference or in your small group instruction. So the free resource yet, I hope you grabbed it. It came with this PD. Inside of there, you're going to find a few good things that I hope you are super excited about. One is the planning guide, how to use one book many ways. It looks like this. Remember, I shared with you, it's more of a brain dump to help you get organized on how to use one book many ways. Inside is also some reading and writing mentor text suggestions. I have broken down a few books that I love to read during reading and writing lessons, specifically at the beginning of the year, and have included the mentor text titles. Also included is that theme picture book pre and post assessment page. You can use that in your theme unit, or you can just use it as a model to create your own pre and post assessment. There's also a sample included in that resource pack on how I use one book many ways for the book A Bad Case of the Stripes. So it is broken down with an interactive read aloud guide and activity for reading lessons, writing lessons, and word work lessons, as well as going further literature activities. So you can kind of see how I use it. And there's a few other things in there as well. There is a picture book bingo board that challenges you to get started using picture books in your classroom this upcoming school year. And if you can get 3 in a row, bring it on over to the speaker chat that's happening with myself on Thursday at 4:40, and you will be entered to win a picture book giveaway. I have a few picture books that I'm giving away, so the more people that participate, you'll be able to get a book. Also, please jot down any questions you have and email me. My email is right here. I really do love talking about picture books. I really truly believe that the value in them and helping all levels of readers grow during the school year that you have them. Please feel free to email me whether you need a picture book suggestion or an idea to help you get picture books in your classroom. And then I have a few other, I'm not sure what the slides are. So this is what I was talking about as far as the sample for the read aloud activities for A Bad Case of the Stripes. You'll see it in your handout. The unit includes lessons about character traits, writing lessons about juicy words and adding description to your writing. And then there's also word work activities about base words and root words. So you'll see that sample in your pack. And I think here is the picture book bingo that I was talking about. So you can see each box covers something that we've talked about. So if you look at that first one, it says find a picture book that aligns to a social studies topic that you need to teach already and come up with one other way to use that book. So you can just jot your ideas down on a sticky note and then put your sticky note on top of that box to show that you've done this one. And then, like I said, bring this completed bingo board, be ready to share something that you found to help you plan for next year at the speaker chat. So I hope to see you there and you will be entered to win a picture book. I don't know why this keeps coming up. And this is what I was talking about. These were the resources that were mentioned in this PD. The sample is from A Bad Case of the Stripes, but if you're looking for other back to school books that are perfect for upper elementary to kick off your year and use one book many ways, this back to school read aloud set is discounted today for all the viewers of this PD. And it includes 4 books that I love to read at the beginning of the year: A Bad Case of the Stripes, Same but Different, The Name Jar, and Listen, which is perfect for mindfulness and social emotional learning to kick off your year. So you can find those in my shop. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the summer. I hope that you can come and join me at the speaker chat where we can talk a little bit more about using picture books in the upper elementary classroom.